Hello, good morning, Austin. Thank you and welcome for coming to our NFT panel. 1 year later, a year ago, South by Southwest was incredibly forward-thinking by inviting myself and a few of my esteemed colleagues to come talk about NFTs at a time where we felt that NFTs were just about to blow up and just about to gain a lot of mainstream adoption. And what we felt was so apparent, we realized a year ago that a lot of folks still really were new and didn't understand what we were doing. And we had this wonderful session here talking about all the use cases, talking about all the opportunities, and it was largely just that. It was theoretical and opportunity. Today, a year later, it's pretty obvious that mainstream adoption is right on the doorstep of Web3, and Web3 is on the doorstep of mainstream adoption. So 1 year later, we're going to look at the use cases, we're going to answer the questions that were asked last year, and ask more questions. Joining me on this panel are, again, my esteemed colleagues in the Web3 space. We have Radima, who is the VP of Business Development at Dapper Labs, Matt Medved, the co-founder and CEO of NFT Now, and Shara Senderoff, who is co-founder of Raised in Space. And we're excited to talk to you and excited to talk about Web3 together. I'll be welcoming my panelists now. Come on out. And I believe we have Shara joining us via Zoom. And here she is. So let's get started, and I would love for our panelists to introduce themselves, starting with you, Radima. Go ahead.
Great, thanks for having me. My name is Radima Huja Khan. I'm VP of Business Development and Partnerships at Dapper Labs. Previously, I was a partner at Andreessen Horowitz venture capital firm, and very excited to be here and talk through all the opportunities for NFTs.
I'm Matt Medved, co-founder and CEO of NFT Now, leading Web3 digital media publication for NFT coverage and curation. Prior to that, I founded Billboard's dance electronic music vertical. I ran Spin Magazine as editor-in-chief, and also ran content at Modern Luxury before going down the NFT rabbit hole. And I'm very glad to be down this on this adventure with all of y'all.
Shara, go ahead.
Hi everyone, I'm Shara Senderoff. I founded and am an investor at Raised in Space. We're predominantly focused on entertainment, Web3 investments, making a ton over the last year. And as Vlad mentioned, we were together a year ago when it was just the beginning or a little bit into the beginning. So really excited to talk about what we've seen the last year.
And I am Vlad Ginsberg, co-founder and CEO of Blockparty. We are a multi-blockchain minting platform. Previous to Blockparty, I worked in the fine art industry, working on the finance side of the blue chip art trade, which I did not expect to be so relevant to what I do now, and I left that world for blockchain. But why don't we get started? I think what is really exciting is that we have two people on stage and virtually that are really experienced in the venture capital and investing side of what's happening in Web3. And starting with you, Shara, can you talk about some of the things that Raised in Space is doing, investing in Web3 and the growth you've seen in startups and companies here?
Yeah, I think the last year has been an absolute whirlwind. Obviously, we're all there together, and I think we saw sort of the initial dipping your toes in the water from the original PFP collections all the way through the initial buzz of what is utility. And I think now we're really seeing the flywheel start to spin, and we're going to see over the next 12 months an acceleration far beyond what we've seen the last year. For me in particular, I've gotten really focused on AI in NFTs, really looking to determine what is next, what is utility, what is beyond gaming, how else do we use NFTs to exist in environments. Obviously, the metaverse has become a bit of a buzzword as well, looking at what does that actually mean? What do we do with the things that we own? Does ownership matter, and in what context does it matter? We've seen sort of the debate with collections, NFT collections coming out around, do you have ownership? Do you not have ownership? How can you use it? How does it connect in real life to virtual worlds? I think we're coming up on really, really challenging problems to tackle around identity, around how we truly move interoperatively between chains. So for me, it's been around how do we elevate the collections that we got involved with a year ago, and what does that look like to bring them to life?
Do you guys have anything to add to that, Radima? What have you seen before joining Dapper or since you joined?
Yeah, I think we have a venture portion of our business called Baller VC, where we invest in companies that are building on our blockchain flow. And really what we're noticing is that this is just technology that's going to hit every single vertical. So we're seeing a lot of great opportunities in the gaming space, in the music space, within art, and interestingly, a lot of galleries are starting to come online to figure out how they can kind of bridge the digital and the physical together. So it really goes and touches every single vertical, and we think that it makes sense to invest across functions as well.
Can you tell us more about Flow? You mentioned that you invest in companies that are building on Flow, and one of the big topics that we chatted about a year ago at this panel was the environmental impact of NFTs. And I think that is, to this day, a misunderstood question, but at the same time, there are a lot of leading voices trying to answer that question, of which the Flow team is one. Can you talk to us more about the Flow blockchain and what it's all about?
Yeah, so we initially built the Flow blockchain after our product CryptoKitties, which we had built on Ethereum. And when we were building NBA Top Shot, we realized that there were some opportunities to, or I guess challenges with Ethereum in terms of building for consumer applications. So we built Flow from the ground up to be a proof of stake model. And essentially what that means is that it's much more efficient. And so we had Deloitte. Sustainability has been at the core of what we've been excited about from the outset when we were building Flow, and now as well. And what we've spent a lot of time on is figuring out how to make it as efficient as possible, and then also doing diligence on ourselves to figure out what exactly our footprint looks like and how we can improve it. So we had Deloitte Canada do a study on the Flow blockchain, and as it turns out, we take 0.18 GWH, which is gigawatt hours of energy, essentially, which is less than a Google search or an Instagram post. And it turns out of the L1 and L2 chains that Deloitte did the study on, we were the most environmentally friendly by a multitude. So we're really excited and proud of that, and hope that the rest of the industry is also kind of following suit in terms of being conscious of the environmental impact we have.
And so with the things you're working on with Flow, and especially being as environmentally friendly as it is, a year ago when we were talking about it, we were talking about some of the early successes like Top Shot and how that was capturing so much mainstream attention because it was capturing basketball fans, not necessarily crypto fans. And a lot of the conversation we were having last year was around how do you engage people that aren't really familiar with blockchain. And Matt, I'd like to transition to you about NFT Now and how you guys think about, as a publication, as a place of editorial, onboarding new people into the space, and what are the topics, what are the beats you guys hit for newcomers?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the mission for NFT Now is to empower the creators of culture and help drive mainstream adoption of NFTs. So we were never content to just be preaching to the choir. Like, we want to help convert the masses. We want to help bring the next billion people into Web3 through NFTs. And so it was very important for us that we always have a ton of educational resources. If you go to nftnow.com, you'll see it's like a ton of guides, NFT 101, how to set up MetaMask, resources on which platforms make sense for which kind of creators, all of that, because the learning curve is really real. You know, like I started dabbling in crypto back in 2013 when there were far fewer guide rails, and I still had to go down the NFT rabbit hole and go through that learning curve in 2020. And a lot of people are going through both concurrently. And that's really daunting for a lot of people. And I've seen that firsthand just in trying to bring new people into the space. There's a lot of friction right now. And obviously, wallet security, things like that, people aren't used to being their own bank. And so we feel like there's a lot of opportunity to help bring people in a way that they're going to be able to safely and sustainably engage with the ecosystem. And so for NFT Now, we're across all the various disciplines. We actually think about our community and like customer segment with a framework that actually we got from a phone call with the late Virgil Abloh early 2021 when he was curious about NFTs, and he had worked previously with my co-founder Sam. And so in that like 40-minute phone call, it was almost like a light bulb moment, because he talked about how he viewed the luxury market and streetwear with purists and tourists in the space. The purists are the ones who are super down the rabbit hole. They live it, they breathe it, they eat it, they sleep it. In NFTs, these would be like, the degens who are on Twitter Spaces daily, all that. But then the tourists in the space are those who are interested, but are kind of dipping a toe in the water, or they don't have time. They work in a different sector, but they want to engage with it, on a weekly basis or maybe a monthly basis, or they need a digest of just what's going on. And so we really try with NFT Now to serve both of those segments, and we think really intentionally about being able to cater to the people and the community that's like the diehards, who are the purists, who are living it and every day to day, while not leaving the tourists behind, and making sure that we are always packaging things that are intended for that segment in a way that doesn't assume that they're crypto savvy or crypto native.
That's you bring up something that's really interesting, which is the use case of streetwear. And I think streetwear is having a moment in NFTs. And I think that it reminds me on the subject of this being a 1 year later type of panel, that a year ago, speaking on this subject were Roham from Dapper Labs, Blau, who's a famous DJ and a leader in music NFTs, myself and Shara, and we were really having this conversation around NBA Top Shot, which was like an early use case, and Dapper before that had CryptoKitties. So these are like very early collection and collectible use cases. Justin Blau at the time was doing very early experiments in what music meant on the blockchain, so on and so forth. So use cases. And I would love to follow up with you, Matt. What are some of the use cases that you're excited about, that you're seeing from where you sit?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's amazing because, while a lot of attention has focused on, use cases like digital art, digital collectibles, et cetera, now photography and music are starting to really gain traction as well. I still think we've only just scratched the surface and potential use cases for NFTs. As a writer myself, I'm particularly excited about literary NFTs. I think NFTs are going to be a game changer for poets and poetry. I'm looking ahead to like TV, film, and how that industry is going to be completely disrupted. Comedy is an interesting one. I had a really interesting conversation with Hannibal Buress about short form comedy and how that could really interplay in an interesting way with the NFT space. I think dancers, choreography. Previously, like people who would build a following online by posting it to Instagram and getting likes can actually now build a community around their work and directly monetize, which is exciting. And then you look ahead to like real estate and titles and deeds and the list goes on. But I'm extremely excited because I'm a big believer that when we set out with NFT Now on our early investors, like some of those investment meetings, people were like, are you only going to focus on NFTs? Like, what about crypto? What about DeFi? And I was like, only NFTs. Like, NFTs are going to be an ocean. Like, each of these categories are going to have publications and that are going to be able to focus in even a more granular way. Like, the IGN of Web3 hasn't been built yet, but it will be. And to me, it's like each of these categories is going to have the same depth and breadth as they do prior to Web3. We're just so nascent right now and so it's actually really exciting because a year ago, I couldn't imagine that we'd be where we are now, but I can still tell that we have so much further to go.
It's so exciting because having gotten into the crypto world in the early 2010s, I really found the entire space, while incredibly exciting, pretty inaccessible for what I would call the mainstream type of user that doesn't really have time to figure out pretty big ideas like being their own bank. And when I saw NFTs start to have a moment in 2018, I thought to myself, this is it. This is something that is really understandable and has mainstream appeal. But that was really only 4 years ago, the first time I saw an artist using NFT. And that means that there's really nobody in this space, or very, very few, that have had the opportunity to put in 10,000 hours on NFTs. So we tend to be in the space kind of skeptical when somebody is like, oh, I'm an expert at NFTs. I'm somebody that knows everything there is to know. But what's super exciting about the space is that folks that have a great deal of expertise are able to have a blank canvas to be creative with this. Shara, back to you. I'd love to see the creators that you work with, the founders that you work with. What are the use cases that excite you?
So I think, and just to give everyone a little bit of additional background on me, I've spent a lot of time in the music industry. My partner in racing space is Scooter Braun. We've focused over the last 4 years on what we call sort of raising the value of music. And what that means is that we've been looking for technology companies that can solve some of the largest problems in music. Now, that doesn't mean that they're music related startups. It just means that they have technical capabilities that can solve some of those problems. Some of those problems, not dissimilar to entertainment as a whole, include rights and copyrights, the future of royalties. It includes how the music industry, again, not dissimilar from entertainment, spends their marketing dollars. What is the ROI? How do we convert audiences? And so when it comes to Web3 and music specifically, I think we're seeing, as Matt mentioned, we're so early, and we're about to see what's going to come. We're seeing the early experimentation of business models around music specifically. We're seeing a lot on Twitter around music NFTs are next. There's a lot of hype around that. But what is not being focused on, and this is where I'm spending a lot of my time, is around the massive complexities on how music can be integrated in this space. Within a particular song, there's often anywhere between 3 and 15 writers. Each of those writers is represented by a different publisher a lot of times. So there are master owners and publisher owners on a particular track, which means that in order to integrate music, and it's the same thing with Web3 approaches to building rights management and royalty tracking and improvements in payment systems, we have very serious, complex issues to solve around how we even integrate music into Web3 and NFTs. And we're seeing, additionally, separate from just thinking about the complexities there, we're seeing business models being experimented around the participation of a fan into the back end of a particular song. The ability to collect a royalty as you engage and promote and become the community and marketing engine around a song. But what we don't have experience yet on, and we haven't seen a proof around yet, is the value exchange. Does a fan want to invest into a song? If they invest $100 to $400, which we know we're looking at average NFT prices, and over a 4-year span, that's only backed by streaming royalties. And we can all see the uproar against Spotify and how minimal of royalties they pay to songwriters and artists. The revenue that can be generated over a 4-year period in streaming is minute. It's nothing. And so if you invest $100 to $400 in an NFT and you return $4 over a 4-year period, is that a great investment? I don't think so. And so then we have to look and say, do fans want to engage in music NFTs simply because they want the flex and the loyalty to say that they got in early? And if so, how many times are they willing to do that? Is that a 2-time, 3-time that they're just willing to put this money into the artist they love with no clear return of value? So I think we have so many questions to answer. That's obviously just focused on music. Entertainment has not dissimilar issues in film and TV and sports, but I think what that is proving is we have a few years of traction into the NFT space, and now we have a few years of cracking the dinosaur industries and where and how they operate. to date and merging the two. So it's showing how much work has to be done here to find the true value exchange of what everyone wants in this space.
That is a tremendous use case and a tremendous opportunity for music. And I want to get back to that, but first, Radima, you're the Vice President of Business Development at Dapper. So really, you're seeing on the front lines what the use cases are that Dapper is partnering with, but also the projects that are coming onto Flow. What are some of the use cases that Dapper is most excited about?
Yeah, I think we're really excited about one thing that's been persistent in all the products that we've built internally as well as projects on Flow, which is community and enabling brands and individuals to have a tighter relationship with their communities. And so what we're experimenting with now is different ways of, in Topshop, for example, of meeting our community where they are. And so when you're at the NBA All-Star Weekend, for example, we'll have a number of activations that you'll get access to. You can see which players are purchasing Top Shots that maybe you've owned in the past. And so I think breaking down that barrier of our relationship is really important to us, and we're seeing that across a lot of projects. And the other thing that's really compelling too is the ability to reward fans with a surprise and delight moment that doesn't necessarily happen because you purchased that specific NFT. Because you're a part of that community, because you purchased an NFT, you now get access to future drops, early access to future drops, or potentially even get airdropped different things that you don't know that you're getting, but because you're part of that, you get to have these special benefits.
And what about some of the newer projects like NFL or things that you're seeing being developed on Flow?
Yeah, so with NFL and some of the other things that are being developed on Flow, I think we're seeing a lot of ability for creator monetization in general. So the way that we do all of our deals is a deal with the league itself, and then we do a partnership with the Players Association, the Retired Players Association. Essentially, anyone that's visible in a clip is going to be getting paid for participating. And we also do partnerships with the photographers, so an AP or a Getty Images. So all these rights together end up paying out sort of different parties that we think is really important. So the creator monetization piece is key for us.
That's so interesting because there's so much overlap from what Shara is saying about rights in music,
Yep.
and now there's also a lot of rights about who captures the photo, what agency is working on it. So are you guys working directly with rights organizations like Getty or the Associated Press, and how does that get resolved? Is that on chain? Is that something that you guys handle?
Yeah, it's something that we handle, and we have a partnership with all those entities, including data providers for the metadata that goes into every moment that you see. So yeah, we have different relationships, but sort of together culminate into the moments that you see online now.
I'm super excited about photography on blockchain. Matt, you mentioned that for a moment while you were speaking. I've worked with photographers for, well, at this point, decades, and I've worked with rights with photographers. And seeing the success of photographers now in the NFT space, Blockparty's focusing on it. OpenSea has set up an entire photography section on their site, and it is really exciting to see photography blossoming, especially because something that we hear from photographers all the time, and something that I help talk to them about, is that photography is this great medium that is very new, right? In the history of art, painting, sculpture, these things are thousands of years old, and photography is kind of a baby in terms of how long it's been around. It has a rich 100+ year history at this point, but it's really, in the grand scheme of things, a newer art form, and it's really a hybrid digital physical art form before there was really digital. However, before digital, photography really relied on the print. Even in sports, we relied on seeing photographs of sports on the back pages. Today, it's really consumed digitally, and the opportunity for photographers to express themselves in a natively digital format without being confined to a print, so adding movement, and I think that's something that Dapper does well, capturing the highlights on chain, but also some of the fine art photographers experimenting with movement in their work or freeing themselves from things you really can't print. you really can't print soft light or, rainy scenes. It's hard, but those kind of things shine on an NFT display. And the ability for photographers to trade that kind of work is really exciting. And so whether it's a photographer capturing sports, whether it's a photographer capturing a concert, something that we're so excited about seeing is this idea of publishing to earn. And that's why I want to come back to you, Matt. And I've heard you talk about publish to earn, and I'd love for you to talk about where you see the future use case of publishing on the blockchain.
Yeah, so one thing that we made really clear from the start with NFT Now is the last thing we wanted to be was just a traditional Web2 media company covering NFTs. I think that in Web2, media companies create a lot of value but have a trouble capturing it. And that's why we've seen the consolidation and shrinking of that industry in Web2. What we want to pioneer is like a community-centric media model. And so I think like one thing that's important to understand is the difference between audience and community. Audience, I always think about it, it's people who follow you, they're aware that you exist, but they're not necessarily rooting for you, they're not necessarily rooting against you, they're just aware of you. And community, I define as people who want to see you win, and often have a stake in the game too, and especially in Web3. And so when I look at Web2, like Web2 was about building audience as a means to an end, to monetize indirectly as like a middleman for brands, largely. Whereas Web3 is about building a community as an end in itself and being able to directly monetize by creating value and then sharing in it. And I think that could be a real game changer for media, because I think the previous business model relying on advertising leads to a lot of misaligned incentives. I saw that firsthand during my time at legacy publications. And oftentimes, we were looking to maximize clicks or maximize views in ways that didn't actually necessarily serve the community or the audience, and more so served advertisers. And so thinking about putting like the community's needs first is something that I think is really important as we look to like the future of media. And we definitely have some big plans in the works, some of which I can speak to, some of which I can't yet. But we're very much looking at being able to incentivize our readers, our contributors, by sharing in the value that they are creating for us and together in that ecosystem. Also really, really excited about the prospect of tokenizing content. One thing that's been really amazing, like coming to South by, is we have the NFT Now podcast, and it's been one of our most successful kind of properties. And I've had a lot of people come up and say, oh, like, I love the podcast. Like, I'm like, oh, it's like, what was your favorite episode? Oh, it was this one. And I'm like, oh, like, would you ever want to own it one day? And they were like, the answer is always like a unanimous yes. Like, I think that there's really interesting opportunities. You think about like a digital magazine cover. That could be a one-of-one artwork that you auction off with revenue share to an artist. Rethinking sort of like these like concepts that are quite familiar in media, but doing it in a way that's Web3 native and allows ownership, and membership. I think that's going to be the future of media, is membership, and tokenized media, and also a model that allows the community to really share in the value that they're helping create.
So I think something like that, and thank you for sharing all that, is something that is so applicable here at South by Southwest, where we're gathered here looking at what all the companies are doing, like what the future of media is. And truly, media is how we communicate as a people. So it's our responsibility, I think, in the NFT space to not only talk about the future and what we're creating and disrupting in all these spaces, but how do we make it accessible? Last time I checked, there are 4 million active Ethereum wallets. They're factoring in Flow, factoring in other chains. That number of active wallets probably inches towards 10 million. There's 1 billion users on Instagram. So I ask myself all the time at Blockparty, what's the role of a platform when we're trying to have a direct-to-consumer economy between creator and collector? Well, one of the best answers I can think of is, how do we do the work of onboarding the next 1 billion users? and get to Instagram levels of NFT commerce. Shara, starting with you, I'd love your opinion and your perspective on how do we get the next billion users into NFTs?
So that's a great question, and I'll lead to that. I want to touch on one of the things that Matt just brought up when he brought up ownership, which I also brought up at the beginning of our discussion. I think ownership, as you speak to that 10 million roughly user base that's in NFTs, is really interesting, because if that 10 million user base, which let's take it down a little, it's probably 2 million would be generous, very active NFT collectors. And when you look then in that 2 million and you look at the top 5% or the top 1%, those whales, and even more so than the whales, like, and I have a couple hundred NFTs in my collection. Well, what am I doing with all of those NFTs, and how am I going to hold them, display them, use them? So I think ownership is really interesting when we look at the trajectory of where the industry is headed, because I think there is a massive opportunity for allowing a particular owner to stake their NFTs for someone else to use them elsewhere. And that's another area I'm spending a lot of time, which is in the future of GameFi, and what does it look like for you as an NFT owner to be able to stake your NFTs to allow someone else to play them in a game. A lot of the NFTs that I own in particular, one, which is my Altered State Machine brain that's behind me. Altered State Machine is the AI protocol for NFTs that I mentioned earlier. And they are launching a soccer game called AFA. And that soccer game has a team of characters. You add brains to each of those characters. The brains allow you to train those players and then be able to go play against other teams. Well, I own 10 teams. How am I ever going to play those 10 teams? I'm not. And we've seen a couple gaming guilds come up with Yield, in particular for Axie Infinity, but we're also seeing a lot of collections. Almost all collections on their roadmap right now have a game that they're launching. Well, who is going to play those games if we only have 10 million holders? We have to be able to allow millions and millions of people to use those and use the NFTs or come into the NFTs at a lower price point. So I think, to answer your question, we're seeing a lot of opportunity in how we build economies around these games so that we can allow more players to come in who may not have been in the early days of NFTs and bought those original Genesis NFTs that can be used in a lot of those games. And then we're seeing now, I think we're going to see over the next year, the expansion of the 10,000 collection. Most of the collections that came out over the last year and a half dropped a 10,000 pool of assets. Well, that's not going to get us to 100 million players. So how are we going to do that? And how we're going to do it is we're going to take the price point down. We're going to create larger assets of utility, or of use cases, so that a young kid can come in and say, okay, I can just mint this collection for free, and then I can go into a game and I can earn a higher priced asset or a more premium asset. So I think we're going to see, absolutely, in the next 6 to 12 months, a lot of the OGs in the NFT space coming out and dropping broader collections that are 100,000 to 1 million initial assets to then participate in their economy. And we're going to see the lowering of price points that come with maybe one access point versus 10 different things, because we have to be able to put more assets into the market. And also, one quick thing, and then I'll hand it back. The reason we can't put that many assets into the market, so let's be real about where we're at. We can't put millions of assets into the market right now. Blockchains are not scalable to the big degree that we see their potential to be down the line. So we can only move to the extent that the technology can move. And we're just not capable necessarily of putting millions and millions of NFTs on a particular chain. We're not capable of moving them as fluidly as we want just yet. We're definitely making extensive progress on that. We'll see by the end of the year the interoperability, the beginning of interoperability, the way we want to see it. But all of those things are a really good point as to why we can't get from one place to the other without a road. And so we're all here, all of us on this panel too, and everyone in this space and at South by, building the roads so that we can get to all these places and we can build higher buildings and all the things we need to bring the millions and millions of people in.
Shara, thank you. There are a couple of beats that you hit that I think are so important, and I think, Radima, you're able to speak to a number of them, especially about scaling a blockchain for the millions of users. But please, go ahead.
Yeah, so our mission and vision is to get billions of people on the blockchain. That's really the core of everything that we do. And one thing that we care a lot about is accessibility. So that can be accessibility in terms of making a purchase. So you should, if you're a UFC fan, for example, you don't need to know anything about blockchain or crypto in order to own a moment and be a fan and be a part of that community. So we try to have that apply across all of our products. I think pricing as well, to your point earlier, is really important. So 90% of what we sell is pretty accessible. So you can buy a pack. So we have pack drops, for example. You can buy a pack for $10, and then once you have that pack, let's say it has 10 moments in it, maybe 8 of them are pretty common, 1 of them is a little bit less common, and 1's really rare. You can then take those moments to a marketplace where the consumer or the fan is able to either sell those moments or hold them and continually prune their collections. But really, we care a lot about the fans getting the value of that upside. So we'd rather sell something for $10 and have a fan purchase it and then be able to sell it later for a much higher price point. But making it accessible at the outset is really core to us, and I think that helps get towards our goal of getting billions of people on the blockchain.
I'm gonna share some thoughts as well. Before I do want to make sure that we save some time for audience questions. We have a few coming in via, I think, South by Twitter. Before we do that, we've shared a lot about not only our perspectives on Web3, but also what our respective companies are doing. We prepared a couple of short clips about our companies, so I'm going to ask our great backstage team to cue those up. I do want to make sure that NFT Now, Dapper, and Raised in Space have a chance to have those shown so you guys see what they're all about. And then when it comes to the next billion users, I've always been a huge believer in art and music and culture. I think culture is how we communicate complex topics to the greatest amount of people. I left the fine art world when I kind of felt that it was getting a little bit too restrictive and really inaccessible to a lot of people. And when I joined Blockparty and co-founded it back in 2017, we thought about NFTs as event tickets. And we thought about how can we get people who love festivals, who love concerts, trading NFTs and trading these things. And while we were experimenting in that, we got to see just music fans touching NFTs on their phones, on their devices, and it was tough, right? It was in 2018. It was tough, and it was a little bit inaccessible. Confirmation times, people buy tickets together, and if I go with 3 friends, if all of us go to a show, we might buy 4 tickets together and want to scan 4 at the door, not worry about gas fees, sending them to wallet to wallet to wallet. So when we saw artists working with NFTs and we expanded from tickets into working with creators, musicians, everybody that wanted to put creativity on the blockchain, we knew that we needed a no-code solution. We knew that we needed to make it easy to mint. If it's not easy to mint, creators aren't going to do it. And if it's not easy to buy, their fans aren't going to care. So that was our first goal. Our second goal, and this is a transition to a question that I saw come in through the screen here, is, blockchains are great, but they're great at what they're built for. These are technical solutions that aim to solve a problem. And the problems that Ethereum solves may not be the problems that Flow solves, may not be the problems that Solana solves. Scalability, as Shara mentioned, is very important. And so when we talk about collectibles, there are fine art collectibles, like a one-of-one painting, and then there are collectibles that come from a huge amount of editions, like a basketball card, or songs that get distributed on Spotify tens of millions of times. So we really can't expect that the best blockchain for a one-of-one is it going to be the best blockchain for an addition of 10,000, or is it going to be the best blockchain for an addition of 1,000,000? And so one of the things that are super important to us is that we're able to mint to multiple blockchains and accommodate both. We've got a wonderful partnership with Warner Music Group, and so when we want to distribute music in a large edition count, and we want to do it sustainably, we build on Flow. If we want to do a one of one that's super valuable and expensive, sometimes we will use Ethereum, and I think in that case we hear a lot of things about, well, what about the cost of gas? What about all of these things? And I'm like, okay, well, when somebody buys a Picasso, you got to spend a lot of money to ship it to to a vault somewhere, and insurance. Sometimes the cost of gas is really important when you think about things like self-sovereignty, the ability to take your one of one and become your own bank, become your own vault. These are some pretty important ideas, the idea of decentralization and Web3 that we think about all the time in this space. And that's really my surface scratching attempt at explaining why we think about different blockchains and why different blockchains matter for different kinds of collectibles. Matt, I would love for you to either expand on that or choose a question from our list here.
No, I could definitely expand on that. One thing that we also made really clear, while the bulk of our coverage for NFT Now is around Ethereum-based NFTs, we are blockchain agnostic. We want to see mainstream adoption, and I'm a big believer that the future is multi-chain, no matter what. And even just like looking at myself as a collector, I own NFTs on Ethereum, I own NFTs on Solana, I own NFTs on Tezos, and it's really interesting to see how these different communities have popped up around different blockchains. I'm a huge fan of the Tezos NFT ecosystem, like Hiket Nunc object, like all of that Teia, because it provides an entry point and an onboard ramp for artists who, especially in developing countries, who may not be able to afford Ethereum gas fees. I've collected art from artists in Brazil, the Philippines, other countries, and for less than $100 a piece, but it was really moved the needle for that artist. It actually made a difference in their lives, and that's an amazing thing, and that's a great thing. And as someone who wants to see mainstream adoption, I recognize that the Ethereum gas fees, while they can be a significant barrier for certain people for many people to enter the ecosystem, and so I'm glad to see that we have alternative routes that are expanding, and I feel as though these other blockchains will serve a role as well in helping expand this ecosystem. And bring more people into the space, and that's why I'm here.
Before we move on, we do have a pretty populous audience. Do we have questions from the audience that we can help answer? I think I saw a hand go up. Go ahead.
What do you guys think about, can you talk more about photography and how that can play into, as a photographer, I'm really curious as to what you guys think.
You want us to talk more about photography? All day. I think, like I said, I think we have an opportunity to work with photographers. I always use the example of a friend of mine and Matt's, and somebody that I think we all know is Dave Krugman, and he is a photographer that shoots like very dramatic sort of night scenes, like rainy New York film noir type of stuff. Any printer of photography or like a darkroom expert will tell you like not a chance. Like you can't print that and have it look great. But when that type of photographer shoots that work and works on it and on whatever tools they use, be it Photoshop, be it Lightroom, and instead of hitting print into like a Jikli or a silver gelatin print, they beam it to a NFT display, and these are monitors that have like very rich blacks and have very rich sort of color. They're not meant to be moving TV, they're meant to be static image. those type of photos shine on a display. We saw it at Art Basel at the NFT Now event, the Gateway. It was really a striking photograph to have on a digital frame, and I think that is a great opportunity for photographers that aren't printmakers. The most liked photo ever on Instagram, and most commented on photo ever on Instagram, is a portrait of the late rapper XXXTentacion. And the young man who photographed him and took that photo never made a print in his life. But it's such a culturally significant work of art because it was so meaningful on a platform that we all use. He didn't have to go learn how to make a print and then go ask a gallery to showcase it and pay them 50%. He minted it and sold it for, I recall, $125,000. At the time, that was Blockparty's biggest sale. And it was so great to see a digitally native photographer find their footing and begin trading. And then now in the secondary market, that photographer is earning secondary royalties. That's so the why of what we do this, and so the why of why I think photographers are going to shine in this space. I think I see a camera around your shoulder, so good for you. If anybody else wants to chime in there.
I'll say real quick, I love seeing photography take off and shine. I think it's just, creators being able to really share in the value of what they're creating lies at the core of the promise of NFTs. And similar to how we've seen digital artists be able to build a collector base, be able to rely on their own creative vision instead of client work. I think that's just a great thing. As someone who works in media, I know how headlines work. I know how media works. We often just see the big headlines about the big sales. But the things that excite me day to day, what I get up excited about, are people whose lives are changing through NFTs in smaller but no less significant ways. Artists who are quitting their day job to be able to focus on their art. People, like creators who are able to make the choice not to accept some client work that doesn't resonate with what they believe in, and instead can actually pursue their own creative vision in a commercially viable way. And it's been amazing to see that in photography, especially because as a journalist, I've worked with so many incredible photographers over my time, from the music industry and beyond, and it's so great to see them getting paid their due.
There's one question that just popped up on our screen that I love, and I think it's a great way to end our panel before we see some of our brand's videos. It's at the bottom here, and how do we explain NFTs to our grandparents, for those of us fortunate enough that our grandparents are with us, or parents? Radima, go ahead, but how would you describe NFTs to your family?
Yeah, I think my family might still wonder what I do for my day job, but one way I describe it is basically a way to express your fandom and ownership and be part of a community through a digital asset that now increasingly you're able to display and share with others.
Shara?
I explain it the reverse because my family continues to say, "So how much is your monkey worth?" And I just stop and say, "Leave that be." I explain it the reverse way, which is, if a creator, and you guys have spoken beautifully about photography, if a creator puts something on chain, from the first mint on, they participate in the revenue. And I think that's one of the most important things to understand about the NFT world, is that we're now not allowing for creators and their art to go out and then someone to take it, print it on shirts, print it on whatever, sell it in stores. That original creator who put their heart, blood, sweat, and tears into what they made, they'll be able to earn revenue on that for all time in perpetuity. I think that's one of the other sides that helps a lot of my family understand that it's not just about monkeys.
Yeah. I've actually explained it to my grandpa and to my father. What's interesting is I often use the example of baseball cards as a starting point, because for generations our society has accepted that rare baseball cards have value. And just last year, a rare rookie Mickey Mantle card that cost less than 5 cents to make sold for $5.2 million. And why is that? it's not about the piece of physical cardstock. It's about what it represents, right? It's about the history. It's about the cultural relevancy. It's about the scarcity. It's about fandom. And NFTs, I'll often analogize, are just the digital version of that. But they come with all these other advantages, such as not having to, being able to send them anywhere in the world pretty much instantaneously. Not having to worry about them getting damaged in transit. And the point that Shara made, which I think is really critical and drives it home, is the fact that creators are going to be able to share in the value of what they created in perpetuity. And that's often where I get the light bulb moment.
In my case, I've been trying to explain it to my parents and grandparents for a few years, and ultimately, it's helped me to remind them and others that, so much of what we experience every day is digital. We're on Instagram, we're on social media, we're watching things that we're streaming on the television. We're experiencing our lives digitally, we're working digitally all the time. We own nothing. We own nothing of the content that we consume all the time. And we don't have all the answers today as an industry, but we're working on them, and that's huge. And as I'm busy explaining all these things, now they're asking about the metaverse. And I have an 18-year gap with my little brother, who's a high schooler. And he's the best living example of what the metaverse is all about. Because after school, he doesn't care about what he's wearing because he's gonna go to the park and shoot hoops and what jersey he's wearing. He cares about what his avatar is wearing when he goes to play Fortnite. And that to me is I'm still trying to wrap my mind around that. But that does illustrate the metaverse for me, because a lot of people are living their lives digitally, and they're not. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's just where they live, and that's how they interact with each other. Radima, I'm going to let you go, and also let us know. I'd love everybody to share what they're working on next, and maybe intro your video.
Sure. Yeah. So. I think from us, you'll continue to see more and more consumer products and amazing companies building on our blockchain flow. I think creators are really at the core of what we'd like to bring out next. So taking some of the learnings that we've developed from working with these large IP partners and putting that power in the hands of creators is really important to us. One example that we talk about a lot is the fact that Van Gogh died broke, but if blockchain had existed earlier, that may not have been the case because he would have been able to make royalties from that. So that's really important to us. But with that, I'll let our video play and it'll speak for itself.
The NFL, NFLPA, and Dapper Labs have collaborated to create digital video highlight NFTs.
I like you have a cupcake.
So one thing I just wanted to point out quickly is the woman that you saw kind of reappear in that video is Lil Michaela. She's a virtual influencer. She has over 10 million followers. She's not real. She has drama. But for all intents and purposes, we consider her to be pretty real. But these are some of the types of things that we're really excited about in terms of building blocks towards that metaverse that you were addressing earlier.
Amazing.
I love that, and I love the point about the metaverse and young generations. One thing we're big believers of at NFT Now is that we are all part of the last generations to grow up without digital ownership from day one. And future generations aren't going to have the same hangups that we do. They're going to grow up owning things digitally. They're going to grow up owning things physically. And they're not going to compare and contrast them in the same way that, and question them in the same way that the present generations do. And so the video we're going to show is actually from our event, The Gateway, that we did in partnership with Christie's at Art Basel this past year. And that spirit was sort of lay at the core of what we were trying to do there, because we see a lot of skepticism and misunderstanding and misinformation, especially in the traditional art world, and there's a lot of fear and kind of we kind of wanted to extend a welcoming hand to that world and bring together that world and give a bit of, with the NFT space, and give a bit of a glimpse into that future where NFTs and digital art and coexist in creative harmony with traditional art and physical art, and show that it's always about an and, it's never an or. And that the future is going to be bright for both. And so that's what we're trying to do at NFT Now, is bring people together, be that welcome onboard ramp for the mainstream market. And so what we did at the Gateway was we transformed to symbolize how artists are taking back the power from the financial system. We took over an abandoned floor of a bank building in Miami, turned it into a 23,000 square foot audiovisual gallery, and really tried to do something special in terms of bridging the NFT space and the traditional art world. So that's the video to come.
Amazing to have an institution like Christie's participate in this space. And Shara will end with you and then say goodbye to everybody.
Great. Well, I don't think I have a video, but hopefully my video was live, because one of my big portfolio companies and partners is Fluff World. So hopefully everyone, if anyone extended throughout from last weekend, went to Fluff House. And I think Fluff House is an amazing example of how we're bringing the metaverse in real life. And there's an expansive plan for how Fluff House goes all around the world. We saw it at the Super Bowl, we saw it at South by, and we're seeing how we can bring people out of the metaverse. I think that's one of the most important things, is we could go into these worlds together. We could be our avatars. We can meet people that we haven't met in real life. But I think that's one of the best parts of Ready Player One, was it's going to turn off for a couple days because we need to come back and be with humans as well. So I think that's a challenge we all have as we go and build the metaverse, is how do we be involved in the human experience as well.
Thank you so much, Shara. And thank you to everybody that tuned in. Thank you to everybody that's here. Round of applause for yourselves. You're all still very early, and we're all still very early in this space. Thank you.